Hi, I'm Micah.
Hi, I'm Christa.
Welcome to Bad People. This is a podcast that seeks to create a safe place to wrestle with life's deeply personal questions. Our aim is to be honest with ourselves first and foremost, to confess where necessary and throw stones at our own glass houses, examining experiences with curiosity and vulnerability. These conversations are not an attempt to provide answers or offer simple platitude. Rather, our goal is to hold open-ended dialogue around what simply is, and do so from a level playing field, without fear of judgment or shame. Join us at your own risk as we excavate the ways belief, community, trauma, and relationship has impacted who we both are today.
Awesome. Thanks, Micah. So today's episode, we are going to talk about trauma. And we've called the episode, much to everyone else's chagrin, What the Fuck? So today we are going to, there's a little bit of a warning around language as something that I found as we kind of look at things honestly and try to process stuff from our history, stuff that's currently going on. For me, not necessarily using language at people, but just needing a way to find release. And so that has been something that I kind of want to honor in my journey right now. And sorry if it's a lot for you guys. It's been a lot for a lot of people. But for today, we'll just see how we kind of wrestle with all these different things.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so both of us, we talked about our backstory. We've talked about, that we're not okay.
Yeah. That was a good one.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I mean, It's definitely a longer episode for those that stuck it through. Thanks.
Yeah. But I feel like that probably segues into this a bit of figuring out how, us recognizing when we were not okay and what that looked like. And
the why behind it, right?
Yeah.
Why were we not okay to begin with? And when we sort of saw the spiritual bypassing that felt good, when we'd hear maybe people say even things like not necessarily spiritual bypassing, like mind over matter, or things, gratitude. That's a huge thing in our world today, that gratitude's the highest emotion, and that if you kind of cling to that, you can kind of find your way through a lot.
Yeah.
So those would be worldly pieces of advice. And then in the church, it was more like, what'd you hear?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so intertwined with everything. We're knowing we're not okay, but then we're kind of realizing that was not just, I guess this is where it leads into trauma. It's that wasn't just us. There's a response in us to things going on around us. But I don't know. There's it's all intertwined with the people that are also in a relationship with us, and I don't know, family contexts. And
I think we kind of glazed over some things in our childhood from our second episode, and just sort of going these were things that or these were sort of dynamics that happened in life, whether it was for you, there was some alcohol stuff from your parents, and then there was spiritual kind of misleadings or just teaching that was maybe sort of, you're like, oh, I don't know how to deal with that. And then obviously your parents divorced. So if you why don't you talk about kind of how that actually played out, and maybe some of the detailed aspects that actually caused the trauma.
Yeah. So I guess I want to start as well by saying that I am in relationship with my parents, and I love them both a lot. And but our history together has been complex, and some of these things that I'm going to share around, they would say themselves. And Mum and Dad, if you're listening, you can feel free to talk to me about this, but that they regret some of these things that they did. And I don't know. I just want to put that out there before we kind of get into
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
But so I mentioned, I think in the second episode, that my parents separated when I was 13. And so their marriage was kind of rocky, they would say, I think, and just hard from quite an early stage. But it got to the point where there was sometimes some violence that went on. So in terms of trauma, like, it's interesting because I don't feel like, I don't know, affected by this anymore, because I feel like it's something I work through, but I think it will always be like a part of my history.
Yeah.
And so just even, acknowledging like what trauma is. One of the things that was kind of hard for me as like a 12-year-old was, just seeing my parents like fight, and it would sometimes get physical. So there were evenings where, where I would be like in bed and just frozen because I was like listening to the tones of their conversation, and whether it was getting into like dangerous ground where I knew it could end up becoming like a full-blown fight, or where there would be where it could have potential to get like physical. So I would kind of just be unable to fall asleep and just would be like frozen, lying there kind of until they sort of like the conversation died down and I heard them kind of part ways or go to the room, or someone would leave, or and then I was finally like, okay, and then could let go. But that was like, that's a hard thing to kind of.
Well, in those moments you're experiencing, like that's your nervous, like your heightened kind of senses and your like awareness. So your hearing is like elevated, right? Like you're trying to take in whether or not you're safe or they're safe. These are people that you love. And so just on like the biological level of you, probably having like shortness of breath and then going without sleep. Like those are interesting kind of things to deal with as a young person. Yeah. And then the visceral reaction of like, oh, you have like a knot in your stomach, and that those are, I think from sort of our both experiences, we could say like those are imprinted on us, and they kind of make either elevated speak or, conflict or whatever else. Those can feel very unsafe. And so I think I think you're saying like, okay, that's kind of when those things came into your life, those sort of traumatic events.
Yeah. And just learning to live with that as a dynamic is like, you're kind of always, you're not ever able to relax or just be, because you're wondering when someone's gonna, set someone else off, and you're just always kind of on the alert for how that, and then I guess that impacted like times where we were having a good time, or it was happy to be like, it's short-lived, or like, when's this going to end, or what's going to happen to like blow this up, or, so it was never like peace in that sense of, so I think it was just hard for all of us. Like they were having a hard time and hurting one another, and we were having a hard time hearing them do that. And
it's interesting just to talk about why that even goes on to begin with, right? So like, obviously, I mean, you would say you have a pretty decent marriage, but marriage is hard. And then when things are not working out, and for whatever reason, right? And then the reason that they would stay together is maybe not the most helpful, right? That might have been, again, sort of a spiritual reason, like whether you believe that you are not holy or you're not going to be blessed, or what, I don't know. There's a million different reasons that the church or that people believe that marriage is like this holy, what do they call that? It's like, when something's sanctified, like this, like, it's this covenant bond that you can never break.
And it's almost like and that was very much the view, I think, or at least not the view, but what had been ingested by my parents of like marriage is like the right way, right? And you don't mess with it, like
totally,
even if it's absolute hell. You've got to stick in there, and because you're kind of like sinning in a way if you, like God can't do it, or that you're going to divorce, or like we were brought up with that. Like I heard that you don't even like mention the word divorce, or it's like, it's almost like it's like the evil eye, like, oh, you said divorce, like now who knows what might happen, like
how many superstitions. Like, well, I feel like sermons are literally like on a Sunday morning where you're sort of warned to like no, any talk like that, that's so wrong. And
you're inviting in that.
Exactly,
that
right?
Spiritual,
Which again
is an interesting thing to think about.
And then when you at a young age sort of are witnessing like, oh, this does not look good. And like God is supposed to protect this, or God is supposed to like work this out for them. And even to trust that like your parents are doing their best, but yet it's not working out.
It's just like it's confusing when you're being taught that marriage is the way and the right way, but then you're like, but I don't want this. Like I remember thinking that
of course,
as a kid, like if this is what it is, I don't want marriage.
Totally.
It's so hard and it's so painful. And so like they just but I think as I grew older and matured, I just realized as well how much like, I don't know, how much was influenced by faith, like you're saying, or like religious teaching. And then how much choice is involved in the matter as well. And then also that after having like a few friends go through divorce and then even seeing marriages start like really quickly and at a very young age, you're like, oh, wow, like, started to think more like sometimes it is better for people to separate. And then we were like, I can say now as an adult, like my parents are kind of each happy with another partner.
Right.
And
interesting.
They're doing, they seem to be happy. And it's just nice to kind of see them happy instead of like stuck in a, I don't know, perpetuating like painful cycle of hurting one another.
Well, and
being happy at all.
And that sort, like you said, like that can be a violent experience. Like often we think of violence as like, you know, guns a-blaring, but words like really, like strong. Like again, wrong. It's just, and then, you know, if people are getting also like mildly physical or more physical with each other, like, again, it's too much for children, I think, to be exposed to. And would have done something to inform, again, like imprinted on you to go like either marriage is bad or these folk aren't safe. So how do I keep myself safe, or how to be over responsible, and then go, okay, how do I position myself to make sure they don't get into a fight? Or I don't know, like I don't know, anything resonate there with you to go?
Well, I think like as a kid, you're not like rationalizing all this, right? You're just taking it in as in trying to, and then you have a response. And mine was obviously like fear and just on alert all the time and just hoping they could sort of get along, you know, at least so no one would get hurt.
Right.
And I think what's tricky is that what was being modeled is like, this is how you deal with anger.
Right.
Or this is how you kind of deal with conflict in a relationship, is that it just gets blown way out of hand and you can't like. And so not seeing them be able to like resolve any issues or just talk through things in a like, not a mature way, but just like a way where they could control their emotion. Right. Like you grow up thinking that you know, I think like I knew deep down that that's not right. And a lot of the times, even after those incidents occurred, like my dad would express regret for how it had gone.
Interesting.
But just seeing them like, oh, they're kind of snapping. Like this is, you sort of understand that they're very angry and this is coming out of like a very angry place. So like everyone's doing things they don't, that they kind of regret afterwards. So seeing that modeled is like, how do I, I don't know. So I think as well, I learned to just like suppress a lot of feeling as well. Because like if it came out
like that,
it might make you lose control.
And you definitely don't want that.
Totally. Yeah. So like that added to, but and then so that happened, like that's marital kind of conflict got to the point where mum just decided to leave, like I mentioned already. And then she left my dad and we lived in, like moved to a different town. about like 2 hours away, and then tried to just kind of like move on and continue living. And Mum didn't really want to allow Dad to see us, so we kind of all of a sudden were like not seeing him anymore, except occasionally or during very like tense circumstances where he a couple of times just turned up at the house just because he like, you know, missed us and wanted to just see us.
Of course.
And like wasn't allowed into the house, or so just crazy things. So it's hard, like all trauma is so tricky because like in one sense it's like my whole childhood was trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And for everyone, not just me, like, yeah, our kind of whole dynamic was just traumatic. But there were things within that like I think as a kid, this is just the norm. Like this is what, you know,
it's what every family.
Yeah.
Well, then sometimes that can get explained to you too.
Yeah.
Like
totally.
It's okay. This is just what everybody experiences, and you're like, this, I'm so not okay with it.
Yeah.
You have no way to communicate that. I don't think.
Yeah. So like that's where I was just like, I knew something wasn't right because like my dad had also told me about love and God's love and like
How not it.
yeah, and this is not it.
Yeah.
Like but yet this is how everyone's acting, and we say that we love each other, and so I don't know, it's just like it's very confusing. And I think I wasn't able to identify a lot of this stuff as trauma until like seeing a therapist and her helping me to like even have language, and even just naming things as like trauma is really helpful.
Yeah.
But the other thing that really impacted me, and that will, it'll always be difficult, I think, to talk about for myself and for Mum. But it was after my mum left Dad, we obviously lived alone with Mum, and she was kind of like our sole parent or sole guardian. Yeah. And she decided to keep homeschooling us, so we were kind of homeschooled from the get-go. And
just a lot of so much. Yeah,
right, to be homeschooling kids like on your own was not much of a support network at all. Like, but as a result of that kind of like isolation and then the stuff Mum was going through with her marriage, one of my brothers was abused like physically. And so that was really hard for me as the oldest sibling to see him kind of like suffering in that way, because it seemed to be very like targeted where it was only him.
Right.
And so I don't know, it was just like he just kind of got on Mum's nerves the wrong way, or rubbed her the wrong way, or triggered her in some sort of way, but he bore the brunt of like a lot of like physical abuse, which was very hard to just
maybe how would you respond to that? Like when that would go on, what did that do to you, and how would you show up in those moments?
Well, first of all, I guess we were kind of like physically disciplined as kids, and that was not abnormal, I think, for like growing up. There were a lot of parents who spanked back then in that generation.
Yeah, and that comes from something in the Bible that says spare the rod, spoil the child. Yeah. Which is this idea that, kind of corporal punishment, or that, it's for our best that we are, physically punished.
Yeah. And it's, so they were my parents were obviously, like, they were Christian, and they were trying to live their life in a Christian way and according to the Bible. And like, that's what the teaching was. Like,
totally.
You've got to like teach kids the way of the Lord young, so they don't, what's that thing? Like, and then they won't stray from it or something.
Teach them Deuteronomy, right? Or a thing. Is it? Well, it's funny because there's a few different places, right? Where there's a lot of pressure, and that as parents, you walk you tell the kids, and as you sit, you do the same, and as you lay down, you teach your children about God, and that if they kind of go astray, then it's on you.
Totally, which is scary. And like as a parent now, I get that. Like, it's something you kind of, it's an attempt, I think, to control in an area where you do have no control, really. Like you have influence.
Yeah, of course.
Like the greatest influence probably of anyone.
Yeah.
But you, at the end of the day, like,
but the more human, just to kind of reference that a little, like the more human side of that is to, instead of pretending that everything needs to be like a sacrifice to God or like this hardened, like, oh, we just pray it away. It's like, what about if that looked like us sort of saying, oh man, today is so hard, and but God is still present with me today, instead of going like, today is so hard, but I'm going to squash that down and I'm going to pray that God gives me the grace to withstand it. Like, I think there's different ways that we've sort of misinterpreted that, or whatever that looks like. So,
yeah. So unfortunately, like, because we were already sort of like physically disciplined, then with mum, she just was going through a lot, and that, for some reason that would come out with my brother, but where she would get triggered, and then she would often be dealing with him out of a place of like anger or highly triggered or just pushed to the limit kind of thing. So then he would just get kind of smacked, as we called it, for like minutes on end. And he would be obviously like highly upset, like distraught, and so for me, I just like knew that was not right. Like seeing him undergo that, no matter what he had kind of done or how he had misbehaved, I just felt like the punishment was never like I don't know, it didn't ever equal the crime.
Definitely.
And he was like, it was harming him. And I, as a 13 or 12-year-old, I don't know, that I knew that. Like, I was like, this.
And did you say, like,
just stand here and let this happen?
Yeah, not to say that you ever should have had to, or that it's your responsibility to have said something, but did you say something?
Yeah, so I did. There were lots of times where I would go into the room where my mum was kind of disciplining him and just tell her to stop, or say, like, leave him alone. And she would often, like, she didn't like me doing that, but it would just be the thing that would kind of cause her to stop. So I felt like, I was kind of the only one who could stop it from happening. But that alone, like, just going into sort of like stop a parent from doing that to another sibling, like, that was, I remember pacing back and forth in front of the door, because she would often like take him to another room and then just be sort of, having at it. And it would take me a long time. I would be in that state again of like heightened, like, just, you're like in fight or flight almost, or just
you are in fight or flight.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
And in this case, you chose to fight, which is interesting.
But it would take, I just, anytime he was starting to behave where I was like, I know where this is going to go, I know how this is going to end, and I know, like, I would be starting to try and like muster up the emotional guts, I don't know, grit or whatever, to like, because I knew what I would have to do then, which was to like go in and confront it and start. But like my mum, it was just very scary and hard to do, because my mum would often be just in like a blind state of anger. Yeah. And that was really scary to confront, because sadly, and so unfortunately, she was not beyond just like, I don't know, lashing out. So I didn't know sometimes if maybe I would get hit, or
of course,
or I would set her off because I was asking her to stop and I shouldn't. That's like me getting out of line, or, stepping out of my place to tell her what to assume that I should be telling her what to do.
Of course.
So there was a lot of fear for me just to like in the prospect of even just confronting her, where I was like, sometimes it would take me like 5 or 10 minutes to get up the courage to go in and be like, stop. And then often like everything was so heightened that I would be like emotional, but I also needed to yell and like raise my voice. And I would also be so angry at the way he was being treated.
Yeah.
So I was often just like, it was a highly emotional like encounter and confrontation that was just like, not good at all.
Exhausting. At the end of it, do you remember, it's funny as you say that, I'm remembering some stuff just about that feeling of like, like you're fighting for life almost, like, and just... Yeah.
You're living like moment to moment where you're just like, I don't know how this could go.
Yeah.
But all I know is that I can't let this keep happening to him. Like, I gotta,
Which is like an impossible place to be as a child. Because I'm sure you've heard therapists it's interesting with like the Instagram reels these days or whatever, but when you rely on your caregiver, right? For like literally survival, right? Food and a roof over your head and love. Love. The huge one. How on earth, to like confront that person that you also like need very much. How do you do that? And just like I think there's like the splitting that kind of happens in a child to go, wait, I have to be a parent or something. Not even like a parent doesn't normally have to, kind of challenge the other one in that same way.
Yeah.
So you're kind of becoming something that isn't maybe healthy or normal. Yeah. Whatever normal is.
Yeah. It's just, it's hard to explain because you're just kind of like, I guess all I can really think about is that, I don't know. It's weird. I think this will always be really tricky to talk about and for my mom to hear as well. But we talk and we've talked about it and she has like apologized to my brother a few times, but and express regret. But I think the hard thing is that does cause damage. It doesn't just go away, experiencing that doesn't just, it will always be sort of a part of the history.
Yeah.
Which is tough.
And it can I would say it can show up in ways in your life that you're just unaware of. And just how those things have echoes, and same with your brother or your other siblings who witnessed it, and maybe your mother too. I don't know, but like that. There is this sort of ripple effect. I'm so sorry. Thank you for sharing.
And I think it was hard in the beginning because it was often that sort of behavior was explained away as being because of somebody else, people. It was never really just like there was a justice wrong and I shouldn't have. It was more like, well, there was a lot of just kind of from my perspective blaming of other people of why this was going on. And I'm not. There were definitely more people at fault in our family than just my mom. Of course, but it's tricky as a kid to kind of hear that as well, like being sort of almost justified as like, well, it's just because of this or I'm being pushed to So I don't know. It's a hard one to talk about, like, and to, I don't know, try and navigate relationship after that.
For you to not either repeat the pattern or be so afraid of, like you said, like a marriage or a relationship or like becoming the thing that we either fear or kind of hate the most. Because I think it's a natural reaction to be angry and to hate that and to not know what to do with those emotions that either you weren't validated or those scars. Like I think we were talking about trauma being I mean, Gabor Mate, he does a great job of talking about trauma, that they're wounds. And that, again, not that, I mean, I've heard this, I've felt this, like the wounds, and not to say this about your brother, because I think getting hit is insane. Like to have somebody actually like physically, because there's proof in that, right? But that what happened to you, even though you are not the one to be physically punished in that moment, there are wounds that exist in you that are invisible, like to like us, but yet very much exist in your insides.
Yeah.
And that's, just, I mean, not to excuse anything, but your mother perhaps might not have ever been able to deal with her own wounds and therefore hurt other people as she's being triggered because something was hurting her, and therefore to get rid of the pain or whatever. And that's, I think that's where in this podcast, are you talking about it, you're trying to go like, no more. For one, let's actually go like, that was not okay.
Yeah.
And let's make, not that we can ever make sure, but let's just go like, no more.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And if this is happening to you, or if you're doing this to someone else, like it has to stop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, like, I'll just say that in our parenting journey, myself, like Grant and I, like, yeah, I don't know. We've talked a lot about like, do we spank our kids?
Yeah.
And we kind of, we decided not to because of that reason, like because of the potential it has to go wrong. And also, I mean, I did experiment. I tried once with my youngest son because he's got lots of emotions and big like feelings, and very different from our oldest son. And I was often at my wit's end with like, how do I
nothing's working or whatever,
tantrums or like. And so I did try one day, like we chatted and I was like, if this keeps happening, then I'm going to have to give you like a spank or whatever. And I did, after like multiple warnings, because I never wanted it to be just a reactive thing where I'm like, smack.
Yeah.
Because that just never felt right to me. But anyway, like I did, I sort of was like, explain it to him and then did it. And it just like, it did not feel right.
Interesting, right?
It did not feel right at all. And I could tell in his eyes was immediately like, why? Why are you hitting me? Like,
totally. But you're safe. What the heck?
Yeah.
Like a real, like, what is happening?
Yeah. And then afterward too, seeing him interpret that as like, oh, when I'm mad or when someone else is hurting me, then I hit them.
Right.
So I was like, oh shit. Like, no, that is not, if that's the message that I'm going to get from this, then it's not right. It's not the right avenue for us to like discipline him. Yeah. So we don't spank.
Wow. It's interesting, like, as you're talking about this, like, trying to navigate, like, what I wanted to share around this. And as you're saying things, it's becoming clearer, kind of how I want to go about things. And one of the places I'd like to start is, like, talking about the moments that I, like, not just spanked my kids, because we did choose to spank our kids when they were little, and remembering like two very vivid incidences, both with the boys. One where, again, just out of like frustration with my third, like literally like hitting him on like the side of the face, and then like looking back and going like, oh my goodness, like I just did this to this sweet, like he was so little at that time. And kind of like losing it, like again, something triggering in me. So if I can take like the position of somebody who was unaware and maybe who was never validated. So you say that you, like, I love that you continue. I mean, you have a lot of distance from your parents. You don't live in the same country. Yeah. But there's some dialogue that's going on where you're saying like, these things happened. They're not okay. I cannot maybe even have a relationship if they're not acknowledged that they're not okay. Yeah. And from my experience in my past, there's not really been acknowledgement. And I think that what happens, or what I've seen can happen, is that if mistreatment happens and it's not validated, you can actually become, I think the risk is greater to then become that same mistreater of other humans. Because if it gets explained to you that, no, that's normal, and you were just continually at fault, and if you had just done something different, something better, like, it is continually it is me that is the issue. And
it's your fault.
My fault. So then I deserved the punishment or the treatment or the words or whatever else. So how I see that then come out in me, so not only, yes, like with the one son that happened, and then I think the more vivid memory was when, again, like trying to find boundaries in my life and trying to find a voice and to go, like, I'm, again, like in the past episode, to go, I'm not okay, and this is how I need to say I'm not okay, and this is what, like, relationships need to look different. But then again, those changes not happening. And then to see how I then acted out. So much like your mother would have said, like, it's because of these things that this injustice happened. What I saw happen for me was that I was like the pressure or the not being heard, or I just have to do something different. And then me taking that out. One thing happened with my son, where, again, the pressure was there, and that if I just controlled him or he was quiet or something, then this external pressure would be relieved or something. And so what had happened was I had gone to him, and I literally, like, not choking, but took him, like, and put him against the wall and held him by his neck. And he looked at me like it was so terrifying for him. And he was like at some point went back, and it's so weird, because in that moment, I, again, knew that was so wrong. And then his response, I was so proud of him. And I was happy that at some point in my house, like, he was able to say, like, that is not okay. Like, somehow I was safe enough for him to stand up in that moment and go, like, you can't do that to me. And I'm going to tell my teacher, and I'm going to tell my friends. And I was happy with my reaction to validate him in that moment. And again, this is like looking back on it, I don't know, like maybe 4 years or something, and to see that, okay, how I can embrace that things are different for me, and where I'm not going to continue like those cycles of mistreatment, is that I'm going to be accountable to the 11-year-old that called me out and when I don't feel safe, and that he actually felt safe enough to stand up for himself, and that he was willing to risk his safety or whatever else and go, I'm going to tell other people, and for me to feel like remorse and to not go, you can't say that. That's a secret. Like, mom was under stress or pressure, or explain it away. Made me really happy. And then, I mean, it's interesting now to see like the choices I made to put distance between me and the kids to make sure that I wouldn't ever hurt them again. Like those, I was still at that point unable to see my trauma and my wounds for what they were, and to then like have proper boundaries in my life, and then like that wasn't the choice that I made to try and keep them safe. I have now made those choices. Like currently that's what I'm doing, but back then it was actually to put physical distance between me and them, where I just worked more, or I was like, I can't have them be unsafe because of my presence. So then I have to remove myself, which again isn't the right thing. At least like maybe their physical safety was better, but they definitely need a mom that can engage with them in healthy ways, that it's like working on her own healing and not just like bypassing or stuffing it down or whatever, or blame, or going like, oh, because this was a stressful situation, therefore I'm justified because I lost my shit with them or whatever. And
and could also be triggering or interpreted like him speaking up. Like, no, just be quiet. Like, what do you say?
Right?
What right do you have to say this?
Totally.
But maybe as well, because like maybe for him that was also out of character for you too. So it's like, wait, what is happening?
Yeah,
like what is? But that yeah, I think that's so admirable to be able to like look at yourself in that moment.
Well, it's interesting
Or it's like a slap in the face almost, like,
yeah, what I do not want to be this person.
How did I get here?
Which again, like I've had now a few of those moments, like we've talked about it a few times more recently, going like, that's not who I am. Like I know that, again, it's weird to go like, I thought all these choices in life were done to not have this happen, you know, to have an intact family, to have a family that like honors God and that, you know, are good humans that seek to do good to other humans. Like those are all really high values for me. And then to find myself in this different place of going, oh, I need space to like heal because of why? Right. I think past trauma, past things that have gone on that have been really harmful that I don't really feel super free to talk about because, again, they just haven't been validated. And so I think that's interesting. Like I brought up a few times with you, I think it's been really hard for you to have siblings that you felt like you've had to protect. Yeah. But I also think it's been good to have a witness to go, no, we all saw what happened. Yeah. I feel like it's very different in my experience because it was just me. Yeah. And regardless of me going like, I'm not okay and that's not right. And what the fuck? Like that kind of like fuck off, like the actual like no. Yeah.
You had no one kind of advocate. Yeah. Or even just like
seeing it.
Like, are you seeing this?
Yeah.
Like, is there someone to ask? Like, and is this like,
And it's not been until like recently. Yeah. Because again, like it's all explained away and it's all like, well, we forgive or again, that's been really tricky to have like Christianity kind of weaponized and used against us. And maybe you felt that same way, like, well, you just forgive or, you know, there's grace and understanding for these tricky situations. And it's like, but there's still wounds that are caused. And no different than me minimizing like the wounds that I've inflicted on other people to go like, no, like, okay, like I've done these things and we will forever be changed because of them. And like what do you do with that knowledge? Yeah.
And it's tricky because you were saying about like the just living a good life or doing the right thing, or the spiritual side of it. But then you're presented with like in everyday life just these very real like relational dynamics and tensions. And it's like, well, how does that translate like to reality?
Totally.
And like ideal that we believe these things or live this way and then it should all go well. And when it's not, it's like, what do you do with that?
But it's like, also strange that we even subscribe to that because, I mean, again, we talk often about like this Christian background or whatever, but like we should have a long time ago gone, why are we trying to have like these perfect marriages that will keep us safe with like the perfect house and like the children or whatever? And not maybe like super affluent, that's not what I'm saying, but just this idea of structure and stability and that, that's a good thing. And then you look at like the Bible and you do not see that anywhere. There is not a picture of a perfect marriage in the Bible. Like there is not a picture of a perfect human the way we kind of in the West here kind of go like the focus on the family kind of vibes. Like that doesn't exist in the Bible. And so like, why is there that crazy disconnect? We see a lot of like wounded and like traumatized people and we see violence and all of this, and yet somehow we're so disconnected from like that very human experience that we read about. And the like it's like I used to have people go like, don't watch Game of Thrones, it's so and I'm like, have you read the Bible? Like it's not, this is the same like it's we're just like protect ourselves and this stuff doesn't exist. And it's like, no, people are really like, everybody's pretty fucked up.
Well, it's also like this kind of like like, I don't know, peace is almost translated to be like an absence of conflict, hardship,
totally,
any kind of tension. So then we kind of like, you see that kind of at church where often where it's like, you know, everybody's working hard to keep it nice and friendly and no one's saying anything that's gonna like
ruffle feathers and make someone uncomfortable or whatever.
Kind of like keep up that veneer, but it's not reality. And then we come home to our lives and our bills and our pressures and our like,
and the trauma that just exists, like these wounds that have not been able to heal because we just keep slapping another like Band-Aid, and it needs air, it needs space, it needs whatever, right?
Yeah. It's this weird kind of like dissonance, I think.
Yeah, and it's hard because now again, like, okay, why are we having these conversations, right? To acknowledge that trauma exists and that change can exist, but that these, like, why even engage, right? It's not to have future safety or to know that there will ever be like we won't have painful experiences. It's like, no, let's talk about them and let's try and again be curious about, like, because often the tendency when something hurts, like if my hand is sore and there's a big gash in it, then I'm probably like not going to use it, or I'm not going to, like, I don't know, go in some salty ocean or something. And then you're like, well, I'm actually going to stay like 50 yards back from any of that stuff. It's how to go like, okay, is that the answer? Like the full pendulum swinging the other way out of fear that could be painful, or fear of like, oh, what if I get cut again? Or this, like, there's all these things that we kind of like, it kind of re-injures, or we can then do the same things over again, kind of being oblivious to them.
Totally. And I feel like even like this podcast, why are we doing this? Maybe as well as to have space to even just like talk about our failures. Yeah. Like the story you just shared.
Yeah.
Like being able to even just like recognize when you do something that you're like, I regret that.
Totally.
And then be able to talk about it in a healthy way, like, because you don't want to do that.
No,
you don't want to do that again.
And there can be so much shame around that. Like I could, and I have felt shame around, like, how could I do that? How could I let that happen? That's been used against me too, for people to go like, see, you're not that great, you do shitty things. And I'm like, yeah, I do, I'm not old. Yeah, exactly. And be grateful that, like, for somebody that hasn't done something so extreme, like, good for you. But then if that either has happened to you or you have done that, you're not alone and you can do something different.
Yes. Yeah. And I think as well that like brings to mind Jesus with his pointing out of like, just because you maybe haven't done something physically doesn't mean your thoughts are not in like a place where it's the inner world as well. Like
it is
that. It can be,
or words like can be so hurtful, like, and just what you sort of like cast on other people, project onto, right? Like it's insane, like what you then like people get quite injured by that, and they can kind of play into those narratives too, and it's really damaging to cause physical pain to someone, but words and what that does to people is not great. And again, a lot of that, like the spiritual abuse or just all that stuff gets justified, and that's not great. Not good.
It's not good.
No.
Has lasting effect.
As we close out this episode, I think that hopefully, today was a little bit more somber and a little less like sure, for me, a little less sure of myself, and a little bit more reflective around like, like what actual trauma has gone on, and how am I, repeating patterns? How am I responsible to make the change and become the person that I want to be? A big question for me this week was like, again, as I wrestle through this like bad person kind of thing, like, am I just destined to make a million mistakes forever? And that feels terrible. But at the same time, lately I feel like the encouragement to become friends with that, because it feels like a little bit of my destiny is like this painful, making mistakes openly, talking about them, and for those around me can be like, that can be really shitty for the people around me. And yet that again seems like an honest kind of like, okay, that could be true right now. Doesn't have to be true forever, but for right now, that seems like what keeps being perpetuated. And
sure.
if change is possible, then how do I, because I don't think it's like a 180, kind of like what we like to talk about in church, where you're like saved and like everything needs to be different. And I think it's just a very like slow, gradual, like relearning of ourselves. And
and to relearn things, you do have to, like, that does look different. And it does require like changes in practice and being that,
bravery.
Like it's making mistakes. I think that's what I was going to say. When you have been so like almost like afraid to make mistakes,
Totally.
it's like allowing yourself to make mistakes is like the actual path to like healing, because it's breaking free of that like the fear, which was basically just if that's the motivation behind something, it's often not great.
No, and like going back to those, like for you and I both not feeling safe as children, and then like how much does that actually motivate us in life, you know, like or to be understood, or to have somebody save us, or I don't know what those would be some things for me. And what am I willing to compromise in myself to try and find that has been like a big question. And then as I'm not finding those things, then the triggers then kind of come up again. And then I just, again, see that same pattern. And then if I'm going to find a new way forward, there will be mistakes because I don't know where I'm going. Like the church had a path for me that was like, come over here. And I tried that. And we could blame just, well, Christa, you had an affair. Like, obviously you sinned and that's why everything fell apart. Oh, okay. But that's not true. So I'm like, I don't know. It's just like, I have to find a new way forward that I'm not sure anybody has kind of gone over here. This based on like my specific circumstances. This is how you navigate that and find like healing on the other side. I'm not sure that there's that easy way.
It's messy. Kind of just a trial in it. You like, kind of do just have to put one foot forward and
totally
be trusting your gut as best you can. Like,
and I mean, maybe for you, like a question, because I mean, this could be like, oh, like those were some bad things that happened in your childhood that you had no control over and that were done to you, to your siblings. How do you sort of process the kind of the side of it that, well, for one, you wanted to be the good and go like, well, I definitely don't want to be a part of that bad. But then now, do you still interact with that in the same way? Like where they're the villain or the, like that was like, how are you processing that?
Well, I mean, like there were years where it was difficult for me to be in relationship with my mom because I felt that I had a major problem with the way my brother was treated, and it felt like it wasn't as much of a problem to her, or it was a problem, but it was justified because of like someone else's behavior or someone else. So I for a while we had some space from each other. But we talk now, and she has mom has apologized, which I appreciate. But then it's still hard to see like the effects of that trauma on my brother continue to unfold and be present in his life. And
but now he has to overcome that.
And as someone who didn't experience fully what he experienced, like even having a good relationship or a somewhat maintaining a relationship with your parent where it's kind of good, I have almost felt guilty at times because I'm like, but he isn't getting this, or he never got this, and he needs this just as much as like I do. So almost this, it's hard.
Totally
weird. There's no easy answers, and I'm sure like if Mom, you do listen to this, like we will have some conversations. But yeah, it is hard to know how to like.
And I think it's beautiful this is what's just is, right? Like this is truth. And a lot of people like to go, well, truth is only true in the Bible. Well, no, if things happen, like these are things that have happened, and us just trying to process that honestly. And I think people do connect with these stories because there are aspects of this that goes on everywhere, and that it is really painful to remember, and it, causes like the re-injuring almost as you kind of like try and give it the space and the air to heal and to try and go like, why did that happen, and how has that affected me, and how do I not want to use that broken limb? Like, like there are consequences to everything.
Yeah, it's hard when you talk about that, like because both of us, don't want to like villainize people, and I think there's a lot of like, there's just so many factors to these circumstances, but at the same time, like, I think if you can't point out things that and say this was wrong, like, I don't know, I feel like that can get really dangerous too, because then you're kind of like, where does justice come into this? And I think that's something that for me has always been really close to my heart, because when I would witness my brother experiencing that, to me, I knew deep down in my soul that was like an injustice.
Yeah.
And from that time, I've always like, any stories of kids who are being abused are like, they just get me.
Totally.
That is the one kind of injustice in the world that really does still get me today. Like if I read stories of kids. Yeah. And so like, I don't know. I think we have to be able to name those injustices without like, not in a hateful way. Cause like I do, like I do love my mum still, but it's tricky because there's things that will always kind of point back to that time in our life that will highlight it, and she has apologized, and I have forgiven. I can say that I have forgiven her, but I think it's hard for me when I see my brother still struggling, or the effects that it's had in his life, because then it's always a trigger, to like,
and it's like
take you back to those wounds and
the memories, and that like, and again, all of those things get stored. And to again find release. I think both of us find this creative work of speaking about things helpful, because it's a release. And again, for anybody else that is struggling.
And it's also just acknowledging what is, like you were saying. For me, like, it is easier for me to, of course, to not talk.
Totally. I think for most people,
I think like, that is like hard to explain. It's like, no, I'm not jumping at the bit to talk about this, but I also, I won't deny that happened in my life and in my brother's life, and that it was like wrong,
Well, good for you, because I don't know that everybody is there. I think that I think that is good for you to trust that what you witnessed was had deep effect on your soul. And it's again, it's interesting as things just continue to unfold, and what makes things good or bad, and is there understanding, and then in that understanding, is there justification? No. I don't know. There's lots of, we'll continue to have these conversations, and I think just hoping for anybody that this brings, because I think this can bring up a lot for people,
for sure.
And I think it's valid. I've had just a lot of folk, even as I started, it was more of an aggressive start to go like, this will be about swearing and whatever. And if you find that anger is a part of like what you're feeling as you remember your own childhood or other things that have gone on in your life, much like my son, who was like stood up for himself and was like, this is not okay. Like express that. If Because under anger is sadness. Like you're sad for things that have happened that you had no control over and that made you feel unsafe or made you feel like you were out of control or whatever else. And then just, again, try and find ways to release that. Because I think when we don't acknowledge and we just shove it down because it's too uncomfortable and too painful, that gets to be really tricky. So,
and these emotions,
and you're not,
like
they are
telling a thing.
Yeah. And I mean, we always like to kind of end like, are we bad people for either putting boundaries in place or for talking about things that are uncomfortable or for saying like, this hurt me or this is valid, or maybe I haven't forgiven yet, or maybe, like, I don't know, maybe I am a bad, I mean, I could say that I'm a bad mother for hurting my kid. Like, but it doesn't need to be my story forever. Because change, we like to kind of go like, this is out of our control and we're always going to kind of repeat these things. But no, you can work at it. And you can continue to show up for yourself. And
I mean, I've hurt my kids too. Like,
it's not part of being human, unfortunately.
I'm going to hurt them again. I'm sure I will. Like,
I think that's one thing, don't we all need to say? Or like, your kids are gonna, it's so good if your kids seek out therapy, whether they had the best upbringing or not. There's something, because human interacting with human is gonna be messy.
Messy life.
Thanks for tuning in, you guys. Appreciate another. This one is a bit more on the heavy side, and please reach out. I mean, we've had a lot of really great conversations with folks that
and maybe we'll put in the show notes, or because I am aware that this can bring up and trigger, and maybe even if you're someone who's like experiencing kind of physical abuse or
mental, social, that's the thing.
It's
not just physical abuse. So if you're experiencing some mistreatment,
there's definitely also just helplines to call and just call and speak to someone, or often just speaking to someone is like a great first step.
And you're not alone. That's a huge thing. And mistreatment is not your fault. And sometimes you just need space to see things more clearly. So thanks, you guys.
Thanks. See you next week.